inside today. Had to work all day, and rather than go outside and get dirty in the evening, I'm going to just talk here on the camera. It occurred to me yesterday while watching various YouTube videos and such, how much food do we need? If there's really an emergency, because if the trucks stop running for a week, well, it's one thing because the stores are out of food for a week or two. But if there's a hurricane rolls through and things are really messed up, it could be a month. I know it's not likely, but what happens if something really bad happens? That EMP we talk about, super volcano going off, who knows? But if something happens, how much food do we really need? But I watched an episode, I think it was Alaska Granny. I don't normally watch her, but I watched one episode because the title sounded interesting. How much food do we need? And I got to thinking, I've been prepping and, accumulating store food just so that I have it for many years. I've got some things like beans and rice that are sealed in mylar bags in buckets, and that's good for 20 years. I'm not worried about that. What worries me is how much food do I have accumulated? Well, when I was watching her episode, she was talking about, well, if you look at this much, half a pound of rice a day is barely going to get you by, and beans and rice combo is probably what you need. But I started saying, if I actually look at the quantities of things that I have, can I get an estimate of how long I could last, my wife and myself, based on what I have on the shelf right now? Well, as you can see, I've got a spreadsheet here where I have written down basically everything I have. And I've basically have the metal shelves, and I've showed it to you in pictures before of how I store my stuff. And I've got these things scattered throughout my house wherever there happens to be room, in various closets and such. And what I've done on my spreadsheet is I've got a tab for each room or location that I keep things. And then each tab is a shelving unit or a separate storage area if it's just bulk things stored. And on each shelving unit, I've got shelf numbers, 1 at the top, 5 at the bottom, or 4 at the bottom if it's only 4 shelves. And I basically identify everything that I put on each shelf. And I try to keep it current. Sometimes I fall behind, but generally this is fairly current right now. So I know that in shelving unit 1, which is down in the office below me, in the closet, on the top shelf, I've got 2 jars of bread and butter pickles. And I gotta go and find out what the size on that jar is, but you get the idea. I've tried to keep track of everything. And I basically list down. And what I did today was I said, okay, how many meals are these things worth? And I don't count pickles. That's just kind of an extra that will just supplement other meals. So I didn't even count it as days. And I'm looking over here in this column, and I said, okay, if I have to make a meal out of it, dressing, I'm not going to eat that. Certainly not going to eat toilet paper. Various herbs and chives and salsa and such, those are things I consider a supplement to make other things taste better. In other words, when we get to the rice by itself is very bland. But if you start adding things like herbs, garlic and herb seasoning, it makes it taste better. So I just don't count it here. I'll count it when I count the rice. Well, you can see I don't have any numbers down here until I get down to this one, and that's peanut butter. Now, peanut butter is not something you think of as food all by itself as a meal, but you can eat it as a food. You're probably going to add it to something else, and there are other things that we have on this list that I would consider food. I did not count as food meals, but we can kind of combine things. I'm just counting this as meals. I'm just saying it that a regular sized jar of peanut butter, 40 ounce, 48 ounce, is 2 meals between 2 people, give or take a little bit. You can shovel that stuff in and feed yourself. So I've got a number of jars of peanut butters accumulated here, and I just eat every one of those 2 jars is 4 meals between us. Although really I figure I calculated it a little bit differently. I didn't count things like pineapple chunks, but I did count the canned hamburger. I've got 1 6-pack of those I picked up just because that's a meal each. I got to go ahead and put down the weights on those, but those are decent sized cans, probably 20 ounce, maybe a little bit more. Fruit cups, I got a ton of those, don't count them. Spaghetti sauce. You know, I need to go back and reconsider this because spaghetti sauce is not a meal in itself. It is added to noodles. And I need to check the noodle count because I know I counted those as meals. I've got other things here, canned beef, albacore, which is just tuna, more tuna. And I basically went ahead and tried to based on the number of cans and size of jars and things, estimate how many meals it would make, not including other things. Like, for instance, that spaghetti sauce I talked about, I would take a jar of spaghetti sauce and a pound or 2 of pasta and make meals out of that. As it is, I'm going to take these off because I don't eat spaghetti sauce. I add it to noodles, which are on another page. So I went through here with each one of these things, and if it was not something I would consider a meal by itself, like the diced tomatoes, those are things you add to something else to make a meal. I'd add diced tomatoes to my rice to make a kind of a goulash. But the soups, a can of soup is worth a meal by itself. So you see what I mean. It's probably worth 2 meals. So these are conservative numbers. Oh, here's a shelf that has things like batteries and laundry detergent. Didn't get very many meals out of that for some reason. Here we're back to one shelf that has a lot of oatmeal and such like that. You'll notice I've got crackers here. I've got quite a few crackers. Guess what? I'll be eating that with peanut butter. Who thought? But there's my pasta. I've got quite a bit of that. Various pastas from mac and cheese to spaghetti and other things. I could see I probably want to go buy some more spaghetti because I've got quite a bit of pasta sauce. And I don't have quite enough noodles. Of course, we haven't been eating noodles recently because we're kind of trying semi-keto. And more things here. A few things that are edibles like potato flakes and more pasta, stuffing. But, oh, top ramen. I don't know if I want to consider top ramen a meal by itself, but I'm going to. 48 units, 2 each. I'm going to consider that 48 meals. Even though they're not very much meals, truthfully. Unit 6. Here's getting into some things that are meals, but not really. Like, I've got canned chicken breast is definitely a meal, but I've got a bunch of things like green beans and sweet corn and such. Those are definitely food, but I consider that those something you add to something else to make a complete meal. Because a can of green beans, it's not really all everything by itself. Okay, I got a couple of bulk storage things here. Rice, I got lots of rice stored. Not as much as I should, but you know, I see 174 pounds there right now. That's a good start. And 174 meals worth. I'm considering half pound of rice per meal. added to the other things that I didn't include as meals, but the tomato sauce and various things like that. So we will make a meal with half a pound of rice and whatever we add to it. So I didn't include things like peanut oil. I just bought that here a while ago. It's something you use to cook with. Same with the olive oil. And of course, my last bulk thing. This is the longest stored things that I have. And some of this I'd be questionable about. The wheat flour has been stored a long time for ground up flour. So that may not be good. But the whole wheat berries, that stuff, all you have to do is grind it up. It's good, just like rice, for 20 years. And I just figured a pound a shot at this. You grind up the wheat berries, and you can use it to bake bread or whatever you have. The same with the oats and grains. That's basically oatmeal. I used to eat 7-grain cereal, but it was just easier to leave it in storage and just eat it when I wanted to, because I have it stored in the 5-gallon buckets with Mylar protecting, so it should be good for quite a while. Flax is basically the same thing. I don't know, I haven't really eaten flax. I think it would be something you'd use in a recipe, but I count it as a meal, because you know what? If it comes down to it, we're in a disaster that things aren't available, you'd be surprised what you're willing to eat. Now, so what I did is all the things on each page, these other things, one more shelf. Yeah, I've got one more shelf here. Not an awful lot on this one because it's things like my coffee storage. I've included things like granola bars, which I've got quite a few of, but I don't count them as meals. Those are kind of extras. So I do have some dehydrated eggs and beef and so forth that I counted for, guesstimated that it's worth 10 meals a can, but who can tell? But all these things I went ahead and added up, and each page had a total for how many meals I estimated for. And then, of course, I've got a grand total for the whole thing and the number of days I'd estimated that it might last me. Now, admittedly, you saw I didn't include a lot of things. So this is a wild-ass guess of how long my food supply might last. Admittedly, I'm no Mormon. They say you gotta have at least a year. I'm short of a year here. But I figure that I've got a garden in the backyard, assuming that I can get anything to grow, and based on prior years, I've been able to get at least a little bit every year. I could probably stretch what I've got a year without too much problem. If things go longer than a year without some sort of recovery, you know what, folks? We've got bigger problems than some old man not having any more food. Oh, and you'll notice that I have some other things over here, tabs that I have not showed you. There's a reason for that too. Don't expect to come and share my food. I hope you go ahead and are thinking of how you're going to eat in the future and make sure that you stock up your pantry at least a little bit. We'll talk to you again the next time. Go ahead and hit the like button. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about this. And we'll see you next time. This is Some Old Man signing off.